Opening music, dark, mysterious tones. Slow zoom on old black and white photographs, faded vampire illustrations, and shadowy landscapes. For centuries, the image of the vampire has haunted our imaginations. From shadowy folklore whispered around firelight in Eastern Europe to glittering pop culture icons in modern cinema. But what if I told you that behind the fictional cloak and fangs lies something far darker and far more real? This is not the story of Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, nor is it about the romanticized vampires of Hollywood. Instead, what you're about to hear are chilling accounts buried in America's past. Murders drenched in blood, families torn apart, ordinary men and women accused of harboring unnatural appetites. Tonight, we travel through forgotten corners of history to meet America's vampires. The earliest whispers of vampirism were not American at all. They came from the misty forests and snow-covered villages of Eastern Europe and the Baltic states. These tales spoke of night creatures, restless beings that stalked in the darkness, capable of mesmerizing their victims, only to drain them of life. But the vampire we picture today, suave, elegant, cloaked in mystery, was born in 1897 when Irish author Bram Stoker published Dracula. Stoker's novel introduced Count Dracula, a sinister yet strangely charismatic nobleman whose hunger for blood captured the world's imagination. Almost overnight, the vampire changed. No longer a savage monster lurking in the woods, it became a sophisticated villain, part gentleman, part beast. From that point on, nearly every film, novel, and television show about vampires borrowed from Stoker's blueprint. Sometimes the vampire was terrifying, sometimes tragic, and in modern culture, even comedic. But reality has no need for capes, castles, or romance. When you peel back the fiction, you discover unsettling stories of bloodlust, murder, and madness, right here in America. Now, let's pause for a moment. Vampirism itself, as a medical condition, doesn't exist. But history shows us that myths are often born from truths we don't fully understand. Diseases like rabies, which causes uncontrollable aggression and fear of light, echo many traits of the vampire legend. Another illness, porphyria, forces sufferers to crave heme, the substance found in blood. When these terrifying symptoms surfaced centuries ago, people had no science to explain them. So they turned to folklore. They blamed monsters. They invented vampires. But here's the disturbing part. America has its own bloody history filled with killers whose crimes uncannily resembled vampiric legends. And unlike in fiction, these vampires didn't dissolve in sunlight or retreat into coffins. They walked among us. Visuals, ocean waves. A whaling ship rocking in stormy seas. Sailors working the decks. Ominous music builds. Our first case begins in 1866. The American whaling ship Atlantic set sail from Boston, bound for the Indian Ocean. On board were 38 sailors, many of them immigrants chasing a hard but honest living. Among the crew was James Brown, a 25-year-old cook from Guyana. But Brown had a reputation, hot-tempered, violent, always on edge. The captain, Benjamin Wing, had already warned him more than once. One evening, Brown got into a heated fight with a young sailor named James Foster, just 19 years old. The argument escalated until the crew had to physically restrain Brown. He accused Foster of hurling racial slurs at him, though Foster denied it. Eventually, things calmed down, or so it seemed. The next morning, Foster was missing. A search began. Deep in the ship's dark hold, a crewman named James Gardner stumbled upon a nightmare. There, crouched in the shadows, was James Brown. Beneath him lay Foster's mutilated body, torn open with a whaling knife. The floor was slick with blood. Brown was on all fours, his mouth to the deck, lapping up the blood like an animal. When the horrified crew dragged him away, they discovered Foster's body had been completely drained. Worse still, another young sailor's corpse lay nearby, also exsanguinated. Brown was thrown in irons, raging, hissing, cursing like a man possessed. Back in Boston, he was tried and convicted of murder. He was sentenced to hang. But fate intervened. President Andrew Johnson, known for his leniency, commuted Brown's execution to life in prison. Inside Charlestown State Prison, Brown's bloodlust didn't end. Rumors spread that he killed more inmates. In 1873, he was caught stabbing a prisoner repeatedly, trying to drain his blood. Even in solitary confinement, he somehow attacked guards and inmates with terrifying strength. In 1892, he was discovered once again, crouched over a dead guard, his throat ripped open, Brown's mouth red with blood. Declared insane, Brown was sent to an asylum in Washington, D.C., where he lived until his death 3 years later. Some historians believe Brown's horrific case may have inspired aspects of Dracula itself. But whether or not that's true, one fact remains. James Brown earned his place among America's first true vampires. Visuals: misty forests, log cabins, an isolated settlement in the Appalachian foothills. Long before James Brown, another chilling story unfolded in Dillsboro, North Carolina, in the late 18th century. The year was 1788. A doctor named Alfert moved into the settlement with his wife and young son. On the surface, he was a respected man. He built a fine home by the river, with rooms dedicated to his practice. Locals came to him for treatment of everyday illnesses. But soon, whispers began. 2 laborers who had recently been treated by Alfert suddenly died, healthy one day, dead the next, with no clear cause. Suspicion grew. The town minister calmed the rumors, until tragedy struck his own family. One night, the minister's wife discovered a shadowy figure leaning over their daughter's bed. She screamed. The intruder fled through the window. But it was too late. The girl lay dead, her throat torn open. Fear consumed the town. People reported a giant winged creature circling above at night. Families barred windows and huddled together, waiting for dawn. Soon after, a boy burst into his grandparents' home, terrified. He claimed a monster had killed his parents and siblings. When neighbors rushed to investigate, they found the entire family slaughtered, each victim's neck ravaged, bodies drained of blood. The town organized searches, hired detectives, but found nothing. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Until February 1789. 2 brothers heard screams from their neighbor's house. They burst inside to find the couple dead, their throats destroyed. A dark figure slipped out a window and vanished into the night. The brothers gave chase, following it all the way to the Alfert residence. The town erupted. By morning, hundreds of furious men surrounded the doctor's home. They broke down the doors, searched every room, until they discovered a trapdoor. Beneath it, in the cellar, they found 3 long wooden crates. Inside 2 of them lay Dr. Alfert and his wife, fast asleep, as though in death. The 3rd crate was empty. Their son was nowhere to be found. Dragged into the sunlight, the doctor remained cold, silent, unblinking. His wife hissed and clawed like a wild animal. Without hesitation, the townsfolk executed them both and burned the house to the ground. The killing stopped, but for years afterward, people whispered of a shadowy figure seen wandering Dillsboro's streets. Had the Alfert boy survived? Was he innocent, or the true heir to his family's curse? Gas lamps flickering in narrow French Quarter streets, wrought iron balconies, old cemeteries with crumbling tombs. If there is one city in America most synonymous with vampires, it is New Orleans. The Crescent City's rich mix of cultures, French, Spanish, African, Caribbean, produced folklore unlike anywhere else in the country. And within that folklore, rumors of vampires ran rampant. In the late 1700s, the city whispered about a mysterious nobleman who called himself the Comte de Saint-Germain. He was charming, sophisticated, and wealthy. He hosted lavish parties where he dazzled guests with his knowledge of languages, music, and history. But he had one peculiar trait. He never seemed to age. Some guests claimed he told stories about events hundreds of years old, as if he had been there. Others noticed he rarely ate in public, preferring to drink a crimson liquid he called wine. The legend took a sinister turn when a young woman leapt from his balcony, screaming that the Comte had tried to bite her neck. When authorities raided his home, they found bottles filled with a mixture of wine and blood. But the nobleman himself had vanished, never to return. For many in New Orleans, the Comte de Saint-Germain became the city's first great vampire legend. But he would not be the last. Visuals: black and white photographs of New Orleans docks, narrow tenement buildings, eerie silhouettes of men in hats. Fast forward to the 1930s. In the French Quarter, a teenage girl staggered out of a 3rd-story apartment. She was pale, trembling, her wrists badly cut. When police reached her, she revealed a horror inside the building. Upstairs, they found 4 other victims, tied to chairs. Each had identical wounds on their wrists. Each had been slowly drained of blood, kept alive, but barely. The survivors told police that 2 men, brothers, had kidnapped them, keeping them prisoner and feeding on them night after night. Later that evening, the brothers returned home. Their names were John and Wayne Carter. Dockworkers by trade, monsters by night. The moment they saw police, the Carters fought back with what officers described as superhuman strength. It took 7 or 8 men to restrain each brother. When police searched another property linked to the Carters, they made a horrifying discovery: the remains of 14 more victims, all drained of blood. The trial was swift. The Carter brothers were convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. Their bodies were interred in the family crypt within a New Orleans cemetery. But the story didn't end there. Years later, when the crypt was opened for another burial, the coffins of John and Wayne Carter were found empty. Their bodies had disappeared. Soon after, people in the French Quarter reported seeing 2 shadowy figures, eerily resembling the Carter brothers, stalking the streets at night. The tale grew even darker when one of their surviving victims, a man named Philippe, was later arrested for committing a string of brutal murders himself. His victims were homeless men, all killed in the same fashion, their blood drained from their bodies. It was as though the evil of the Carters had passed on, infecting Philippe like a curse that refused to die. Visuals, newspaper clippings of strange murders, flickering candles in old churches, archival images of insane asylums. The stories of James Brown, the Alfort family, the Comte de Saint-Germain, and the Carter brothers may sound like works of Gothic fiction. Yet they are drawn from real reports, police files, and folklore that refuses to fade away. Science tells us there is no such thing as a vampire. But when we look at history, we find events that are difficult to explain. How do we understand a man like James Brown, caught drinking blood from corpses? Was it madness, possession, or something darker? What about the Alforts, discovered in coffins, pale as the dead, their child mysteriously missing? And the Carter brothers, were they psychotic killers or predators driven by an unnatural hunger? Even today, New Orleans embraces its vampire legends. Tour guides whisper about figures seen in shadowy alleyways. Visitors leave offerings at crypts believed to hold the undead. And scattered across America, from isolated towns to sprawling cities, there are whispers of blood drinkers who walk among us. Visuals, old medical books, sketches of patients, eerie reenactments of madness. Modern psychology suggests explanations. Some killers may suffer from severe delusions, believing they must drink blood to survive. Others may have conditions like Renfield syndrome, a rare obsession with blood and flesh. But explanations do little to soothe the unease these cases leave behind. Because the truth is simple. Throughout history, real men and women have killed, not just for greed, revenge, or power, but seemingly for the blood of their victims. That is why the vampire legend endures. Not because of fiction, but because reality has always provided stories to feed it. Visuals, fade to black and white montage of old vampire woodcuts, Stoker's Dracula, American crime headlines. Final shot of a candle blowing out. So what are we left with? Perhaps there are no immortal creatures lurking in castles, no caped figures dissolving at dawn. But history tells us that vampires do exist, not as supernatural monsters, but as humans whose crimes echo the darkest folklore. Men and women who lived in our towns, worked beside us, and killed in ways so disturbing that people had no choice but to call them what they appeared to be, vampires. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth of all. Because while myths can be slain with garlic and steaks, the monsters that walk among us wear human faces.